Hey, thanks for coming today. I'm making an origami cake. I love these. I've seen them online, but they've always been plain, so I decided to add my own spin and I'm going to put a pattern on it. I'm going to do three actually. The first one we're going to try is a buttercream. I love the taste of American buttercream. I think it works really well in this case. It doesn't set up quite as firm as ganache, which I'm going to do later. I wanted this to be a very bright yellow, so I'm using some gel food color there. That was a little light, so I kept adding it. But here you'll see next when I'm piping it that it got it to a very vibrant yellow color. Now, when you're doing this, because you're going to make a template for the actual origami pattern, you're going to have to know how tall this cake is. So you're going to have to assemble it and frost it first. So I did a rather shallow layer between my layers of cake because there's so much icing on the outside of this. You don't need a lot in between. At least I didn't think. Up to you. You do what you want to do. Also, I realized I didn't need to do a crumb coat because the thing is completely entombed in frosting. So I rethought that and just focused on making the top nice and flat because I knew I wanted to put a pattern on it. So there you can see I'm just focused on the top, making it nice and flat as I work forward. Now we're going to start to make the actual pattern for the origami. My cake turned out to be 5.5 inches high, so I took some paper. I'm not sure what the weight was. I can look and see if I can put it in the comments, but it's a fairly thick paper. So we can cut it and we can fold it, but it will also sort of hold its shape. So here we're going to make the zigzag pattern. Now, some people have done this in very thin pattern. I did every 2 inches because I wanted enough area to put my pattern on, and I also think it looks kind of cool with the bigger zigzags. So here we're doing 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, and then what you do is you go back in and you're going to go from the diagonal from the top of that one to the bottom, and you just kind of go zoom and make a line. And now you'll go the opposite direction from the same top point and you go to the other side, and again we're going to kind of make it, line it up as best you can, and then again you'll just kind of draw it down and there you go. And you just keep going back and forth making this zigzag. It's like arrow up, and now this one's arrow down, and the next one will be arrow up, and the next one will be arrow down. And you'll have to make a few of these depending on the circumference of your cake. 4 was plenty for me. And now what we want to do is just fold those, every place we put a line, we're going to fold it. I found it easiest to just throw my straight edge in there and kind of push it over. I ultimately did all the verticals first and then went back to the angles, but in this demonstration part you can see I'm kind of doing the angles and then the vertical and then the angle, but you'll get the idea. When you do fold them, I think it's always good to fold them in both directions. So you'll see here I'm pushing it against my straight edge, and you can see the weight of that paper is kind of thick. It's like a cardstock. But you can fold it, and then I folded it over and pushed it down, and then I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to fold them back on themselves. So you're folding in both directions. I found that made it a lot easier when I actually went to make the fan shape, which we'll do in a minute. You'll see what I mean. In any case, with the folding, you're just going to go along and you're going to go back and forth, and I'll speed that up because you don't need to listen to it at slow motion, but you can see, there we go. We're going to go on one and then fold it, and then we go across and fold it, and we go across and fold it, across, and keep working way down until you get all your pieces. Okay, now we're going to do what I said, that fan pattern. So you're going to fold them opposite ways. So you go one way, then you fold it back on itself. Here you can see I'm folding it in the other direction. It wasn't really cooperating, but you can make it, try to make that point very sharp, and then you go in the other direction and just keep working your way. In the end, it'll look a little bit like that, like a bow tie. And then when we pop it open, you can see those arrows very clearly. So you have sort of up arrow and down arrow, and that's your origami. It's really kind of cool. All right, so I made a bunch of those so that they had enough to go around the circumference of my cake. I will say some people will tape on parchment paper on the back of their pattern. I did not do that. I just made sure that the side where I had any ink or pencil would be away from the frosting. I do think you'll see later it would have been a good idea to add the parchment because it probably makes the buttercream smoother, but in any case I just did it this way. Now when I was ready to frost, I put my frosting into this piping bag with a tip simply because I wanted to make sure that I got all the frosting down into the V all the way because I didn't want air pockets down in there. I knew that would ruin the shape. So I started there and I just filled in each valley or the V there. And then when I was finished with that, then I could cover the entire thing with icing. And you'll see it takes a lot of icing to do this. Like I said, it really entombs these cakes in icing. But and it kind of flattens out the pattern, as you can see here. It was I was sort of worried when I was doing it. I thought, oh no, it's too flat, but it's okay. I put the cake on a piece of cardboard, and then there you can see. Uh, and now I'm going to take this piece with all the icing and I'm just going to put it on, and then I thought I'll just rearrange it on the cake, and it worked out well. So here it's still pretty flat, you can see, but I just pushed it against the cake to make sure it was getting a solid contact. And then I pulled them back with my fingers to both make sure that they were equidistant, but also that I could feel that they were full of the icing. And if I didn't think they were full, I add a little bit more, and you'll see that in a moment. But I could really work with the shape, pulling it back and forth and trying my best to make sure. And I would know it was full with the icing. You can see there when it kind of pushed up and I would see it come out the top, or the one next to it, I can kind of see it coming out of the bottom. There you go. So I felt pretty confident that those arrows or those V's were full of icing. Now those ones you can see are a little bit low, so I take a little bit from my bowl and I fill it in. There's a lot of really good videos on how to make these cakes, so feel free to look around the internet, but this is my version. Okay, so I'm flattening that icing across the top. As I said, I was going to put a pattern on it, so I wanted it to be flat. And then I just continued. Now the next one I made much smaller. The first one was kind of big, so then I did it in smaller pieces. You can see there. I forgot to pull out the zoom, so you can't really see what I'm doing, but it's exactly the same principle. Just make sure that you're going all the way around. And now I'm going to make my pattern for my chocolate transfer sheet of the sun shape that I've got on the top there. One thing I should mention is that I did throw this cake into the freezer, so it's really nice and hard and set up because the butter's set up. And now I'm just going to make that template out of a piece of acetate that I had on hand. You can see I cut it out in the pattern to the right. And because this cake is frozen, you can peel off the paper. There you go. And while I think it works really well, I did get a little aggressive in the corner. You can see the cake showing through, so I just went back and filled that in with icing. But the shape is good. It did set up. I didn't have too many air pockets, so generally I was happy. But I will say, because I didn't put the parchment paper, it looks a little fuzzy. Like the cardstock that I use kind of pulls off some of the buttercream, and it looked a little bit fuzzy. But that's okay because we're covering it in chocolate transfer sheets anyway. So there's my candy melts, which I'll use with my chocolate transfer sheet. The candy melts I had were not the correct color of yellow, so I did color them. You can do that. You just have to use an oil-based color. Look that up. You can't use the gel food color. And then I just heat up the candy melts and put it on the chocolate transfer sheet, and then I put that on top. Now, I didn't film that. I wish I had, because it was kind of harrowing. I had to flip it over and make it match the sun shape below, but it worked, and it's a little bit, the overhangs were slightly too long, which is what I did intend, but I did have to go back in and cut them back with a heated knife. Now we're going to make our vertical panels. We're going to cut those out individually, so all I need to do is repeat the same sort of zigzag, make it 2 inches wide, and cut it across the angle, and it'll fit perfectly into our template. So we've got our chocolate transfer sheet using the same technique as with the top. You're just going to add the warm candy melts onto those transfer sheets. I've used this technique a lot. You can go see it in the tiramisu episode. There's a lot of different ones, but I like this technique for transferring pattern. You just have to be gentle. You put the warm candy melt on there and you just gently pull it across so you don't disturb the pattern of chocolate underneath. You just want to let it set up a little bit. You don't want it to be so drippy or too hard, so you may have to take a couple of passes till you get an idea. But there you can see that frosting does look funny, right? It's very fuzzy. But anyway, tasted great. So now I've got my piece ready to go on. It's just the right amount of setup and still pliable. I had put the actual cake in the freezer though, so that buttercream was pretty cold, and I was so happy. I'm getting it in there. It's really lining up. And then I accidentally pushed it back a little too much. And now it's out of alignment. And honestly, the second it hit the cold buttercream, it was like, I'm setting up. You can't move me anymore. So I couldn't move it around. Typically, I advise against moving them around in any case because you'll smear the chocolate pattern. But I wish it had been aligned to the front a little bit more, but it works pretty well. So I'm just going to keep, here's a slightly different vantage point. I won't go through the whole process again, but you can see we're going to dribble that on, we'll just smear it out gently, let it set up just so it's not drippy, but also it's still pliable. And then we'll pick it up. And here I go. I'm shaking so much because I'm nervous, but here we go. And we just tuck it right in. Now in this one, again, it's set up really quickly because the frosting is frozen. But I wish that front, where my thumb is there, had been a little bit closer together. But it's all right. I mean, this was my first take on this. I think it's generally successful. And then once you get them all the individual panels put on, you'll just take off the acetate. You don't want to forget to do that. And I honestly find that like so satisfying because those candy melts are amazing. It's very shiny. It just looks so cool how shiny and totally edible. It just makes it's a great way to put a pattern on a cake, I will say. And I think this largely is successful. Could it be better? Yeah, it's not perfect, but I like it and I wanted to put it on the internet just to get this up. If I do another one, I'll put it up as well. But there you go. So you're just going to go around and make sure you get off all that acetate. Oh, I wanted to leave this in because, oh my gosh, look, the entire panel came off. I was like, oh no, it didn't set up. But I left it in to show you that when you do them individually, that's kind of nice because if something does go wrong, you can go back and fix them later. So they're not all connected. You can pull one off, you just pop it off on the back, and you can redo it if you need to. So there you go, spinning around. I think it's visually pretty stunning and not bad for my first try. Now I'm also going to show you, I did two other versions as I said, and one is with, both are with ganache, and I'll show you here. So we do chocolate ganache with a snowflake pattern, and that's my chocolate ganache, same template technique, so I won't take you through that again. But there's my candy melt. It was a light blue snowflake pattern, which I thought looked really nice against that brown ganache, and the ganache is very, very thick. I just use a chocolate candy melt to use my transfer, and that looks pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, I really thought that looked successful. It's just that's a very thick cake. It's still completely edible and it would be fun at a party, and I do think again visually pretty neat. Again, not perfect. The roofs tend to give me a little bit of trouble, but that's okay. So as long as I was experimenting, I thought, okay, I've got this zigzag shape going. Let's do it in plaid. So I took the origami and I did it in a plaid icing sheet, which is different than a chocolate transfer sheet. Icing sheets are more forgiving because you're not so dependent on the warm chocolate to do the transfer. It's almost like a a pattern in fabric. You just cut it out. I attached it with some chocolate, but you could also attach it with edible glaze. And there you go. So those are the three. I hope you liked this. I hope you give it a try. I'd love to hear your comments. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends, and please come back. Thanks for coming today. Have a wonderful day, and bye for now.